Want a quick and spooky project that is as boo-tiful as it is fun this Halloween? This ghost poncho is the perfect fast Halloween costume. Hi, I'm Christina. I'm a digital pattern maker who loves creating wearable art that you can wear and share. And today I'm going to show you step by step how to sew this floaty ghost-inspired poncho. You can grab the full pattern down in the description below and then follow along as we sew it together. Don't forget, if you enjoy videos like this about sewing cute projects or even learning digital pattern making, make sure that you subscribe for even more sewing pattern fun. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to be projecting my pattern off. Therefore, I'm going to be using projectorpattern.com. If you use projectors and have not checked out this website, I highly recommend you checking it out because it is so fast and so easy to calibrate and to work with. Once my projector is calibrated and my fabric is laid out, I'm going to pull up my pattern pieces and start laying them out. I did buy this fabric. This is actually a bed sheet that I found at a thrift store. First, I need to see if I have enough fabric to actually cut out both pattern pieces double-sided. Because the fabric is a little bit thin, I wanted to have an inner and an outer that I'm going to sew together to really make sure that the white fabric of the bed sheet is not see-through. I'm going to start by laying my fabric out and marking with pins to check to see if I have enough fabric. And it is going to be super tight. I might have to take off a little bit of the back of the length of the hem, which is okay because it is a little bit longer in the back. Now I could also decide to make the front a little bit shorter as well, but that would be up to each individual person. Now that I know I have enough fabric for this beautiful ghost poncho, I'm going to pin around the front to hold the 4 layers of fabric I have here together, and I'm going to cut out the pattern pieces. Then I'm going to fold up the pattern and move my fabric so that I can then pin around the back pattern piece and cut it out. This is again where I'm going to have to be super careful because I am extra tight on fabric. So I will be paying attention to where the top part of the poncho is and the hem of the poncho. Then I will cut it out. The last thing I need to cut out are the neck facings. I'm going to be using the scrap fabric from the bed sheet. I'm going to lay out one of the scrap pieces, flatten it out, and cut it out. Then repeat for the back neck facing. Now it's time to move over to the sewing machine. I'm going to start by sewing the side seams of both the outer layer of the poncho and the under layer of the poncho. So I will be sewing 4 side seams in total. Once the side seams are sewn, I'm going to move over to my ironing board and I'm going to press each one of them open. It is essential that you press in between steps to really make all of your garments look amazing. Then we're going to move back over to the sewing machine and with right sides together, we're going to line up the hem of the ghost poncho. We're going to pin all the way around and then we are going to sew them together. This way we are going to be bagging out the hem of the ghost poncho and it will create a nice, clean, crisp, final hem look. Once we have sewn all the way around the hem of the poncho, we're going to move back over to the ironing board and we're going to first press open that seam that we just created. Then we are going to flip the poncho right side out, and we're going to press the hem again. Doing a double pressing on a hem like this will really make sure that you get a nice crisp hem right at the seam. Then after the entire hem is pressed and it looks good, we're going to move back over to the sewing machine and we're going to do a top stitch finish all the way around the hem. This will help keep the hem together, intact, and crisp. Now we're going to line up our side seams at the neckline and the rest of the neckline around. This way we can put a basting stitch around to hold the neckline together before we serge the raw edges. Once it's sewn together, we're going to move over to our serger and we're going to serge the neckline of our Ghost Poncho as well as around all 4 edges of our neck facings. Once everything is serged, we're going to move back over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew the side seams of the neck facing. Jump over to the ironing board and iron them open. Once everything is ironed open, we are going to line up our side seams of our neck facing to the side seams of the poncho with the right sides together. We're going to pin around to make sure it doesn't move on us. Then we're going to sew our neck facing onto the poncho. Once the neck facing is sewn onto the poncho, we are going to press open that seam and then flip the neck binding to the inside of the garment and press again. All this pressing really helps make sure that everything turns out nice and crisp, nice and clean, and it will look beautiful. Next, we're going to do an understitch to help hold the neckline seam allowance to the inside. I'm going to be sewing through the top part of the facing and all of the seam allowances. Then when all of this is finished and turned to the inside, there will be no stitching on the outside of my Ghost Poncho. Now I found this was not quite enough to really hold that facing in. The fabric was a little bit too wobbly, so I decided I was going to add one last blind hemming cross stitch to the inside of the facing. When you are cross stitching, your needle is pointed in the opposite direction than you are sewing. You're going to be catching the facing on top, then moving over to the lining and only catching a few threads. You only catch a few threads because if this was your actual full outside of your garment, you want it to be a blind stitch. That's why they call it a cross stitch or a blind stitch. Then I'm going to move back up to my facing and do a small stitch. Move back to the lining and just pick up a few threads and then keep going all the way around. This is a cross stitch and this is a very common stitch for either hemming a garment or even hemming a facing down like this. Once we're to the end, we're going to tie off and then it is time to cut out my ghost face. Now I am going to cut out 2 ghost faces here, one for my pumpkin poncho, which you can check out that video up here, and one for my ghost. There are many different faces for you to choose from, so definitely take a look at what I have or even create your own. I'm going to start by placing my iron-on vinyl onto my Cricut cutting board, making sure my faces are laid out nicely on that Cricut board. Then I'm going to have my Cricut cut out my faces. Once they're cut out, you have to weed out the parts of the vinyl that you're not going to be using. I was struggling to see the cut lines, so I took a light and turned it to the side to really help catch those cut lines so I could easily cut them apart and start weeding. There is a lot of dead space on these faces, which kind of makes me sad and feel a little wasteful, but the faces are so cute. I love them so much. Once I have them fully weeded, it is time to put them on my poncho. I'm going to start by laying out my poncho on my ironing board, get it as smooth as I can with my hands, and then give it a really good press so that it is nice and flat, and I'm not going to have any wrinkles or any other problems when I put on that face. Then I'm going to find the center of my poncho, place my face, make sure that I'm happy with the placement. If you are not sure by visually looking at it on the ironing board, since the vinyl can stick to the fabric a little bit, you could use just a little bit extra masking tape, tape on that vinyl, and put it on a dress form or try it on yourself to make sure you are happy with the placement. Once you're happy with the placement, I'm going to go ahead and iron on my vinyl and then wait for it to cool before pulling off that top piece. Once it's cool, I'm going to pull off that top vinyl and I'm going to, of course, try on my new ghostly poncho for this Halloween. Woo! Your ghostly poncho is now ready to float through the Halloween night, and I cannot wait to see the spooky stitches or faces that you decide to put on your creations. Don't forget to hit subscribe so that you don't miss any other fun spooky projects, or if you're interested in learning digital pattern drafting, definitely check out some of those videos so that you can start making your own patterns. I look forward to seeing you in some of my other videos. Happy sewing!